It's the brand that helped revolutionize the car industry, but Europeans seem to be turning away from Tesla with sales in decline. Has Musk's political interference on both sides of the Atlantic had an impact on his flagship business? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, the tech billionaire Elon Musk's position in Donald Trump's administration and his support of far-right parties in Europe has led to a backlash against Tesla. There's been protests at dealerships across the US and here in Europe where sales have slumped. So, why are people turning away from Tesla? And what does that mean for the future of the car brand?
Hey, hey! Oh, oh! Elon Musk has got to go!
Protest outside a Tesla dealership in New York City against Elon Musk. Several people were arrested amid a heavy police presence. It's part of the Tesla takedown movement, escalating across the US and Europe, calling on people to protest and sell their Teslas.
The message today is to stop Elon, stop this terrible tearing up of our government, and get things back to normal.
In Europe, his support for far-right parties, including the AfD in Germany, is fueling the movement to boycott Tesla.
I have created the brand new Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, which is headed by Elon Musk, who is in the gallery tonight.
In February, Musk completed his first full month as part of Donald Trump's White House administrations. But the same month, Tesla sales dropped significantly across Europe. In Germany, sales fell by 76%, in France by 45%, in Sweden by 42%, and in the Netherlands by 24%. Tesla shares continue to fall on the stock market after peaking just before Christmas, leaving investors frustrated. Competitions with Chinese EVs have also contributed to Tesla's struggles. A glimmer of light in the UK, though, with Tesla sales increasing by 20% in February, and the rollout of Tesla's upgraded Model Y SUV in Europe hoped to reverse the sales decline. With Musk's political involvement and Tesla's shifting sales, can it still be the people's electric vehicle of choice?
Well, let's meet our guests. Joining us now from Copenhagen is Peter Bardenfleth-Hansen. He's a former Tesla executive who is now an e-mobility expert and board member in numerous mobility companies. I'm delighted to say here with me in the studio, we welcome Nick Gibbs. He's a correspondent on the Automotive News Europe. And Lars Sexton is a former racing driver who recently visited China to test the new EV models. You're all very welcome to Roundtable, guys. Peter, to you first. You've worked very, very closely with Elon Musk for many years. Give us your impression of what he's like.
Well, he's a man of absolutely no compromise. He has an ability to put to work his visions and missions, which are very stringent, very clean cut, and has an ability to get followers on board with his ideas. And his ideas are very cut out of what is called first principle thinking, which is a method of breaking everything down into minutest details and then rebuilding it, if you like, into something a lot more efficient, both in relation to the way that you manufacture it, as well as cost, as well as the way you use it. And his thinking therein was initially, at least, was to help the world, was to save the world through sustainable energy. And that's what brought myself and a whole host of people along in the late zeros, early tens. I was on board with his team for a decade, from 2009 to 2019.
So, Peter, are you surprised at this kind of sudden interest in extreme right-wing politics?
A little bit, and I use the word a little here because there always was some oddities in the way that Elon was thinking. He's very super pragmatic and almost cut away from emotions. I mean, he does have Asperger's, and that can explain some of the things. But of course, if you then evolve that into politics, it can become extremely square in a perhaps more rounded world. But he didn't seem that politically engaged in the time that I was working for him, not to the extremes that we're seeing now. So to answer your question, yes, I am a little bit surprised by it. On the other hand, if you look at the sort of way that he's evolved over these last 10, 15 years, he's come from obscurity into this enormous sort of hero, anti-hero kind of personality that there's nobody in the world that doesn't know who Elon Musk is now. And that in itself, I think, is quite an immense movement for a person. And I think he's become kind of a demigod. And that type of, let's say, submersion into demigod world will bring you into certain ways of thinking, and perhaps even thinking that you can walk on water, if you like. And that, I think, is probably one of the reasons that we're seeing this anti-hero step onto the world scene these days.
Nick, it turns out politics is not good for business because sales in Europe are falling off a cliff since all of this interest in the AfD and everything he's been saying against Keir Starmer in the United Kingdom. The facts are there. Tesla sales in many, many countries are declining significantly.
Yeah, that's right. We saw that in January, and everybody was sort of very much waiting toward the end of February to see whether that was just a one-off, whether there was some sort of going to be some movement in the market as he picked up, because Tesla sales have always barreled towards the end of the quarter. He loves having this final push. And that can juice the earnings call with the investors, and everybody gets excited about Tesla again. So January and February are generally quite quiet months.
Another factor, Lars, is the rise of China and battery technology. You visited China, you've been driving e-vehicles out there. Give us your impression of how far ahead they are compared to Europe.
Professor Mohan Sully called it last time on the show last year on the TRT Roundtable show. He said that China are just so far ahead, the rest of the world is trying to catch up. So I was lucky to visit China, and oh my God, the experience was completely different to what you get over here in the UK and Europe. I drove a Neo electric car, and we run low on battery, and we selected a station to go and recharge the car, and it was like ants on a screen. There were so many stations. So we selected a station, we drove to an empty car park, a barrier lifted up, the car drove itself into an unmanned garage, the floor opened up, and robots removed the battery from the car and put a new fully charged battery in. And I think within 4 or 5 minutes, we'd gone from empty to full, and we're driving out.
What kind of an experience was that compared to what we're used to here?
Night and day. Over in the UK, you don't even know the charging point's going to be working, let alone you're going to get a full charge. So yeah, to be in and out in 5 minutes on a full charge is exactly almost like a combustion engine car. It'd probably take 4 or 5 minutes to drive to the station, fill up with fuel, go and pay for your fuel and leave. So to have now an electric vehicle that is comparable with filling up a combustion engine is, in my mind, phenomenal.
Peter, how much of Tesla's decline then in Europe do you think is down to the fact that the Chinese are just so far ahead now?
There'll be definitely reasons why this is, and I think there's a number of reasons. The list is relatively cumulative if you look at it. I think what Lars is pointing to here is it definitely has something to do with it. We would be looking at things such as the missing facelift of the Model Y that's taken too long. There is the self-driving units of the Teslas that also have not really delivered on what's been promising. And when it does come, it's way too expensive. It's about $9,000. Whereas the likes of BYD, for instance, with their new God's Eye, can do exactly the same thing for full self-driving capabilities, but it's all included at a cost that's even lower than your round-the-mill Tesla. So what you're seeing here is definitely the perfect storm against Tesla. And then on top of that, you then have this situation with Elon, who's really tearing down a brand that he has spent 15 years building up, and he's tearing it down in record time.
Nick, to you, there are so many car companies all over the world. They all have chief executives. We don't know the political opinions of any of these people. They're politically neutral. Do you think he's going to learn a very harsh lesson here?
Elon has he's never been one to learn lessons. So the whole history of his automotive career is doing things that the OEMs don't, and then having to fall back in line, some respects, with the rest of the industry when they don't work. So yes, there's a reason why we don't know the political opinions of most of the world's global automotive CEOs, because they know it could be really damaging. I mean, you look at somewhere like China, for example, they're very, very politically sensitive. So, 2017, there was a spat with Korea, and the Chinese took it upon themselves to basically eradicate the Korean cars from their buying list. And they've never recovered. And now, Hyundai, Kia barely sell cars in China in the same way that the Japanese do, for example. So, they once they get something in their minds, and I think we're seeing that with Europe. Europe, we've been a bit more circumspect, but there's never been a baddie quite like Elon Musk.
Lars, to you, talk to me about the brand then. What do consumers think of the brand in Europe? I mean, if you go online, people are calling them swastika cars because of his support for the far right in Germany. There's an advert popping up in London that has him standing in one doing the infamous salute that he did, and it says 0 to 1939 in 3 seconds. I mean, this is brand damage.
Yes. There were two things that I've been told when I was younger. If you want to lose friends, talk about politics. And then the other is there's no such thing as bad publicity. So this is really trying out that theory of there's no such thing as bad publicity. He is a unique person. You don't get to where he's got to being a normal person. But yeah, his allegiance, politically wise, is alienating a large chunk of his customer base. I have friends that have had Teslas, early adopters of Teslas, and are massive advocates of Teslas. And in researching for the show today, I spoke to my friend, and he actually had his Tesla damaged last week. And he thought
vandalism.
He thought at the time that a car may have reversed into it. He's researched the way it's been damaged and has come to the conclusion that it can only have been done with a person pushing in the vehicle in that area. So now, after watching the news and seeing what's been going on, he's now thinking that's vandalism to his Tesla. In France, somebody set fire to a Tesla dealership in protest. So if I had a Tesla now, I'd certainly feel like I was a target.
Peter, to you, when people buy a vehicle and you're spending a lot of money on a Tesla, people want to be secure. And if people are going to spend 56,000 euros on a vehicle, they want to know they can leave it outside their house at night without it being vandalized. I mean, will Musk even care that this is happening to his customers?
I think he will, because it's going to start hurting him on his, net worth. Much of his worth is stuck in Tesla's shares. So if they continue plummeting, that's definitely going to have a direct effect on his wealth. On the other hand, you could halve his wealth and he'll still be the world's richest person. So that from that perspective, maybe it takes a bit more. But there is definitely a discrepancy here and a misalignment, because I think on the one hand, he's experiencing an enormous fan base that's growing up through the MAGA movement in the US, who's carrying him forward, who love the fact that he's standing on a new platform with his motor or chainsaw swinging that about. But that does not align with the type of customers that are buying the Teslas, whom are more in the democratic kind of mindset as opposed to the Republican. Now, the people who are now building up Elon's fan base, well, they're all about combustion engine trucks, and certainly not anything to do with EVs. So from that perspective, he's really it somehow is doubling down on killing Tesla, and that is going to have serious consequences, I believe. And to be quite honest, if you're going to look at what the future is going to hold for Tesla as a company, it's going to be something where Elon's not involved anymore.
And Peter, just another point to you, fellow shareholders, how long until they start getting really irritated that their shareholding is worth a lot less because of his politicking?
I think to Lars's point as well, if you want to lose friends and divide the world, then basically that's going to be very quick. And particularly when that division means that the part of or the biggest part of your sales market part is in the wrong division of what you're dividing your brand into. So I believe we're talking months, if not weeks, until somebody's really going to start asking questions here, because he will also be opening himself up for litigations, for various legal actions, because he's not doing or performing what he should be doing for Tesla and its shareholders. But he's obviously 100% otherwise engaged.
Nick, to you, just as Peter was saying, I mean, you can take away half Musk's money, he's still the richest man in the world. But ultimately, this is a business.
Yeah.
And he seems hell-bent on driving it down and down month by month. I mean, Europe is giving him a very stark response to all of his interest in right-wing politics.
It's funny, as one analyst called Tesla a reluctant car maker. And they are kind of, because they went in there, they went in to disrupt the car industry. And to that effect, they did extremely well. They forced all car companies to rethink how they made electric cars, how they got into the business of software, and even the selling of the cars. He forced them to all think differently. But at the same time, he's now hit a wall. He's hit the same wall that all the other car makers have done. It's a very, very margin depletive industry. It requires a lot of capital, and it's very hard to make that margin. Now, that hasn't worried him until now, because he's been able to promise his investors the world. We're all going to be driving around autonomously, and he's made that claim variously over the years, and it hasn't happened. But they've kept the faith, and now so he's having to start divesting himself or the company away from automotive. And the last earnings call, he was talking about the Optimus humanoid robots. He was saying that that's going to be a 10 trillion revenue business. And you're scratching your head going, how in the world is that ever going to replace Tesla? But in his mind, it will, and that's what he's got to do. He's got to motivate all his investors and all his fans to think there's something else coming along on the horizon. And for automotive, and all his claims on the autonomous side, I don't think that's going to happen. So he needs to sort of broaden the company out a bit.
Lars, is there a school of thought that customers, potential customers, are holding off this year, waiting for the new model that's been promised?
Yes, most definitely. There is that. But we live in a very influential world now. Now, for me, if Elon's aligned himself with Trump, and Trump's very much America first, I can see the fact that there's such a drop-off in Germany, France and Spain, that those people over there may be going, well, Germany first. We live in an influential world now where people are being very, very influenced, and one way they can vote is with their money.
Peter, I noticed the American singer Sheryl Crow sending her Tesla back, putting it on the back of a truck, waving it off. It was all videoed. That went viral. How damaging is that to the brand, seeing a very well-known face saying, no, thank you?
Well, I think again, if we focus just on the U.S., we definitely saw that having big names supporting the Democrats certainly didn't do anything great for Kamala Harris. So I think this very much speaks into the narrative of those who are already anti-Elon, if you like. But there's definitely, this is more than a U.S. brand now. Elon cannot rely on just selling to his fan base in the US. This is a global brand. So when you put those glasses on, then yes, this has an enormous effect. And we're probably and most likely going to see much more of this over the next couple of months, if not year. But there is an old saying coming from Peter Thiel, his former colleague and partner, who said, never bet against Elon. And he does have some enormous amount of energy that can pop him back up. And it may very well be his Optimus robots. It may be RoboCop, but you never know on a RoboCop as well coming. That he has an ability to lure everybody's attention to away from the fact that he's now losing money on the car sales, but getting everybody very excited about something completely different. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to be very difficult this time round to get the shareholders convinced that he's going to be the right guy to carry his company forward. I think Disruptor has become disrupted.
Peter, you spent a decade working with Elon Musk. How important is the Tesla brand to him then as a person?
Well, it was everything. I mean, him, Tesla, and Elon was one of the same person. Although we used to joke about the fact that Tesla was his mistress and SpaceX was his wife, because he would used to spend about 50% of the time at each place. But I thoroughly believe that certainly at the time, that was one of the same person. And that's when it becomes so dangerous, that when one person is personalized into the brand, then it doesn't take much to destroy that brand if that person all of a sudden changes his political views or in other kind of ways steps in the wrong way on the public scene, as we're seeing right now.
Nick, it used to be such an aspirational brand. Has it still got that kind of luxury vibe about it?
Well, we'll see when the facelifted Model Y comes out. So deliveries of that start in June. And, they've done a good job on it. It's not going to change the world in terms of the design, but it looks new, it looks fresh, and it could spark sales a little bit further. But at the same time, if you're driving a facelifted Model Y, you've bought a car that after he made that gesture, right?
Yes.
So you have aligned yourself with his politics. It's almost to say, because if you drive a Model 3 or a Model Y now, you could have bought it before he went crazy. Well, in most people's minds. So now this is the test. We've got a new car. Our people are willing to look outside the politics to pay for something that's objectively better than what it was before.
Peter, just final point to you. I mean, how shocked are you that everything you've seen, you worked for so many years with vehicles that were meant to be saving the planet, sustainable, green energy, clean energy, and your old boss aligns himself with an American president who doesn't even believe climate change is a thing?
I am quite shocked, to be quite honest. And I in the first couple of years, from 2011, 12, 13, I directly had report to Elon and had many one-to-one meetings with him. And quite honestly, I am shocked. That's I can't put that in any other diplomatic way.
And you said earlier on, Peter, that nobody should bet against Elon Musk. And I know he will have forever money, and his great-grandchildren, plenty of them, will have forever money. But do you think he can dig his way out of this?
Again, you should never bet against him. I mean, he definitely has. Remember, we right now we personify something very much with Tesla, but he does have a whole palette of other companies. Of course, SpaceX is the one we know of, but there's Neuralink, there's the Boring Company. There are a ton of other companies out there, and so I definitely believe that he will continue on his missions and visions, whether it's going to be a full focus on getting to Mars or in some other aspect of changing the world. But what I've come to learn is that this making the world into a better place or changing the world is, yes, it is changing the world, but it's changing the world into what he perceives is a better place, not necessarily an objective point of view. And that is only recently come to my mind that's the bigger problem here. This is very much Elon's world and how we're living in it, and not necessarily something that's for the greater good of everybody.
Peter, thank you so much for your insight into the world of Elon Musk and all the years you spent working with him, and to Lars and Nick for their analysis of Tesla sales as well. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.